Hello and welcome to another history episode of Keep the Flame Alive, the podcast for fans of the Olympics and Paralympics. If you love the games, we are the show for you. I'm your host, Jill Jaracz, joined as always by my lovely co-host, Alison Brown. Alison, hello. How are you? Good day.
Good day. I sound so stupid when I say that.
I know. I think a lot of Americans do.
You know, a lot of people do this thing when you're talking about something that used to be or we used to do this, and people say, "Oh, 25 years ago it was like that." 25 years ago was 2000. You got to reorient your brain.
Right. Right. Oh, it's really creeped up on us. But we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of Sydney 2000 this year. All year long, we've got stories from the games. First, we would like to say thank you to our patrons, especially new patron Gabriella. Thank you, Gabriella. Patrons and donors keep our flame alive. The show does have expenses, and it takes a significant amount of time to research our history episodes. Oh, you would not believe how much time I spent. And I wanted to do a lot more than I did, and I just had to say stop. You have to stop. But there may be blog posts. I will warn you now. There may be blog posts from me. So if you appreciate the work we do, go to flamealivepod.com/support to find one of the many ways you can support us. Some are free, including a special offer for our patron subscribers of all levels, including the free level. Learn about that more at flamealivepod.com/support. Yeah, I will be putting up a conversation between me and producer Ben about seeing September 5, the movie. If you have not seen it, I know it's streaming on Paramount now, which is tough because it's another service to subscribe to. And it's such a good movie. I wish I could find a bigger platform. I don't know. Maybe Paramount Plus is bigger than I think it is. But also look at your libraries. Maybe they've got it. I don't know, but it was so good. So we'll have that coming up. I'm still taking care of Majer's. So it's taken me a little while to get to a lot of stuff. But you'll find that soon.
I am writing something for our patrons about a peek inside Alison's notebook
Ooh,
from the
cool.
figure skating world. So I'm actually going to post pictures and transcribe some notes. So if you enjoyed the World Figure Skating Championship show and the ridiculousness that is my report, I've got much more. So take a look at Patreon and help us out a little bit, because that we could only go to the World Figure Skating Championships because of the support that our patrons and donors have given us over the years. So thank you so much for that. And you'll see my little notes.
Excellent. That will be cool. Again, flamealivepod.com/support. So this is our monthly history episode in which we look back at one particular games all throughout 2025. Those games will be Sydney 2000 as it's the 25th anniversary of them. Today we are talking Mascots and the Olympic Sailing Regatta. And I will say it was the first year for parasailing as well, which is now out of the Paralympics and keeps trying to get back in. Could not get to that because the Olympic sailing had a lot of stories, but it's still on my list. So don't worry if you're into parasailing, we will look at that too. But you've got Mascots. We've got 3 of them.
I've got
Let's go.
Mascots, and no, we actually are going to talk 4, because we're going to talk the
Oh,
3 Olympic. Actually, we're going to talk 5. We got 3 Olympic, we've got an unofficial, and we've got a Paralympic.
wow.
So, oh yeah, we got a lot here. Sydney organizers wanted to avoid the controversy surrounding the mascot from, Atlanta 1996. Sydney did not want anybody saying, "What is it?" So they wanted to focus on real animals, but they didn't want to have a kangaroo or a koala. They thought that was too typical, and they wanted to highlight the diversity of the wildlife in Australia. But this was the greatest little tidbit I came across. Brisbane had hosted the Commonwealth Games in 1982, and they had a live kangaroo as the mascot named Matilda.
Oh.
So Brisbane, in case you want to use some historic elements here, go see if Matilda or her descendants are around. Just a thought. But they did want to make sure that they could sell merchandise. So they wanted to go with cute and cuddly rather than terrifying alien creature. So
All right.
as you will, You put out a call and have an open contest. So they got a sketch for what became Millie from a graphic designer named Matthew Hatton. So he was paired with Joseph Sescaris. I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. And they, as a team, developed what ended up being the first trio of mascots. Never had a trio before. So we end up with Olly, the kookaburra, Sid, the duck-billed platypus, and Millie, the echidna, or spiny anteater. So Olly, his name is short for Olympics. He was a symbol of air, representing the Olympic spirit of generosity, and his personality was described as a larrikin, which I also had to look up. It's Australian slang for a mischievous, rowdy, but good-natured sort.
Okay. I'm
Sid,
guessing they hang out at all of the sports bars and go and watch some footy.
I would agree. Maybe some cricket, maybe some Australian rules football, probably some rugby. Yeah, the larrikin, I got multiple definitions of, some leading down the road of hooligan, and some being like a good natured scamp. So
Oh, those good natured scamps.
exactly. Well, Sid, the duck-billed platypus, is short for Sydney. He symbolized water, representing the environment, activity, and energy of the Australian people. And he is described as laid back.
Okay.
Okay. Then we have Millie, the only girl of the group. Her name is short for millennium. She is symbolized with Earth, and she represented technology and numerical data. They made her smart. And she is
Sorry.
described as smart and witty.
All right.
See, this reminds me a bit, if you're a Harry Potter fan, of kind of like Harry and Ron and Hermione. They made Hermione the smart one. It's like, why is the girl always the smart one? Not that I have a problem with that, but it felt a little regressive. But it is 2000. It is a long time ago. So all three animals are native to Australia and were selected to represent things that people probably didn't know about Australia in terms of their wildlife. And they were named by Philip Sheldon from the ad agency Weeks Morris and Osborne, based on design ideas and name ideas collected in that open contest. And the mascot's colors echoed the red, yellow, and blue of the Sydney logo. And as I mentioned, this was the first time we had a trio. So Calgary in '88 had a pair. Nagano had your favorite, the four owlets.
Love them.
But we saw trios twice more, right away in Salt Lake City 2002 and Sochi 2014. But this and Beijing are the only time that the Summer Olympics had multiple mascots.
I will say that it's a trend I do not like. Even though I do love the outlets, I do not like having 3 mascots. I think it's too many.
Yeah, the way that they've developed this sort of one Olympic and one Paralympic now is the trend that we're seeing. But for a while in the mid 2000s, we kind of got all these multiples.
Yeah.
Sell more, you got more merchandise.
Yeah, but and I guess if you don't like one, maybe you'll like the others. But I also one of the things that I don't love about these is that they're so that cartoon realistic. I feel like I'm gonna watch a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yes, that is one of the criticisms, that when they showed up as costumes, it did not work. So at their introduction event, they were described as funny, friendly, and thoroughly Australian. And they first appeared on T-shirts, not as dolls as we see them most now. It was mostly that cartoon image that was used, and I think because when you translated it, it didn't quite work the same way. But the 3 did tour the country in a full stage production with music and dancing.
Please tell me some YouTube of this exists.
I have not found YouTube of the music numbers, just like brief seconds in other news reports.
Right, right, right. I was like, "Oh, come on, there's gotta be some news footage."
There is, and it is as terrifying as you think. There was several news pictures of them as, balloon blowups.
Oh, okay.
No, not okay. I am not okay after seeing that. So along with that not translating into costumes, the other criticism was that their personalities were overly bold. And I think more because they weren't cute and cuddly,
Oh,
that they
because you can have something that's cute and cuddly and still be a scamp and be bold, you know?
but not a hooligan.
No.
And others found them sort of generic and bland. And still others were like, "Well, what's wrong with a kangaroo? Everybody loves a kangaroo."
And a koala.
And a
And a
koala.
wombat.
Well, it's funny you mention a wombat because satirists Roy Slavin and H.G. Nelson created a show for Channel 7 called The Dream with Roy and H.G. And The Dream was a sports comedy show and it became absolute must-see TV during the Sydney Olympics. Now, they were not pleased with the official mascots, so they came up with their own, named Fatso, the fat beep beep wombat. And and he was described as a chippy wombat.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So Fatso was a huge hit and apparently more beloved than the official mascots. And throughout the Olympics and in the run up to the Olympics, there were segments on the show that featured an animated Fatso competing in sports. But then they had a doll produced. There are only 2 of them ever produced, but once they had the doll, they included segments where Fatso the doll was competing with the official mascot dolls. The one I was able to find most easily was in diving. So this involved throwing the stuffed animals off the diving platform into the pool in front of judges and some fans. So needless to say, Fatso won that competition. And they would add in things like, "Oh, look, even New Zealand scored highest for Fatso." Like, they would throw in these things, and, like, the official Australian judge would give it a 0 and give much higher scores to the official mascots. So they threw in the satire, but also
Oh, that's
Fatso,
hilarious.
the fat beeped wombat.
I would be so into Fatso.
You are not the only one. Australian athletes loved Fatso so much, especially the swimmers. So Susie O'Neill and Grant Hackett carried Fatso onto the podium with them when they won the medals. As I said, there were 2 Fatso dolls produced. One stayed in the studio, one went to the athletes' village. Fatso's fame continues on because Michael Klim, who was part of the absolutely legendary 4 by 200-meter men's swim relay. I can't wait to do swimming and tell you that story. He also brought Fatso onto the medal stand. Well, the picture of the 4 of them, including Ian Thorpe, was made into an official stamp in Australia. So Fatso is on the stamp.
Get out of town. Oh my gosh.
The only people not terribly happy with Fatso's popularity was the Australian Olympic Committee. And they were particularly upset that Australian athletes were increasing Fatso's fame and exposure.
Oh,
So
of course, this is hilarious.
so they issued a directive to their athletes not to be seen with Fatso, not to bring Fatso onto the medal stand, and to not pose with Fatso. Well, Australian athletes didn't like that, and the public didn't like it because Australia freedom of speech, right? You know, why freedom of assembly. I want to hang with Fatso. So the then Australian Olympic Committee president, John Coates,
Coach.
had to apologize publicly
What?
and rescind the attempted ban and
Get
say,
out of here.
Australian athletes, we're sorry we tried to restrict your freedom of expression.
Wow, John Coates backed down from something? That also, to I feel so sorry for the poor underling who had to write that memo.
You may be seen with Fatso. And I think I didn't see the actual memo. I just heard the reporting on it. I have a feeling Fatso may not have been mentioned by name in the memo, like something generic, like it's okay, you can be seen with the unofficial mascot. But that's just my speculation. So if I find the official memo, I will share it on our Substack newsletter because I can't even imagine how John Coates got himself out of this one. This is John Coates not going rogue. He's going straight arrow here.
Wow. I will tell you, this show sounds like it is the Franck Jus of
That's
Sydney
exact
2000.
that's exactly what I was thinking of, the show you loved so much at night in Paris, where it was every night they would do, but this was not official. This was definitely the satire, and they had a lot to say about the commercialization, and there was a lot of things about Sydney 2000 that they didn't like at the time.
Interesting.
It's very easy for us to look back with nostalgia, but I'm sure for people who had to live with it in Sydney and in Australia, that can be tough.
Right, and they're coming off of very commercial games, and we're not that far away from pro athletes getting to be in the games. So that's a total mind shift, and I do remember still having not arguments, but there were a lot of positions of, "Oh, amateurs should still be in the games," and we don't find out until later, unless you were hip to it then, that the games were already full of pro athletes. They just were hid that pro-ness by government spending on their careers, basically. But, yeah, I think there's still, like, a grappling with the fact that the Olympics as we know it are changing, and we see where it changes for some sports and not for others. So it's a different situation.
So, speaking of money, as I mentioned, there were only 2 Fatso dolls ever made. One was kept by the show's hosts, and one was auctioned off after the Olympics. It was sold to Seven Network chairman Kerry Stokes for 80,450 Australian dollars.
Wow.
That money went to Olympic Aid, which is now known as the Right to Play program, part of the United Nations Refugee Agency. So, Fatso, the fat beepity beep wombat, in essence, helped create the refugee team that we have today.
Oh my gosh, what a story. Wow.
Okay, now we've got our Paralympic mascot, which I was trying to remember. We've talked about Lizzie, the frilled neck lizard, and I think it was on our Patreon show
Yes, because
when we
Lizzie
do March
Mask
Madness, March
mhm.
Mascot Madness. Okay, so we haven't talked about Lizzie on our regular shows, so here we go. Lizzie was a frilled neck lizard. She is characterized by her determination, strength, and ability to survive in the toughest conditions, and she symbolized the passion, power, and spirit of para athletes. She was created by the same design team for Olly, Sid, and Millie. Her frill is green and gold, which we see for the Australian team, and it's supposed to be in the shape of Australia.
Oh, I'm looking at Lizzie right now, and I kinda get that.
Right, you got to squint and turn your head a little bit to see that, but I see where they were going. And her ochre body is to reflect the color of the soil that you
Oh.
see across a lot of Australia. And Lizzie, as a name, was chosen by a nationwide vote of Australian students.
Oh, nice, okay.
So Lizzie was mostly seen in cartoons, though there has subsequently been a costume created. So in these cartoons, Lizzie was voiced by Sandy from Greece,
Oh,
otherwise known as Australian superstar Olivia Newton-John.
wow.
If you remember, this is the second time I've gotten to reference Olivia Newton-John because she sung at the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, the theme song for those games. So Olivia Newton-John, Australian superstar, was all over Sydney 2000.
Wow.
And Lizzie has also proved to be much more enduring than Sid, Olly, and Millie. She appeared on merchandise for years after the
Oh,
games. She was made on coins for the Australian Mint in 2021 and 2024 in connection with those 2 summer games, and she has become the mascot of the Australian Paralympic team, much like boxing kangaroo is the mascot for the Australian Olympic team.
very cool. And kind of like how Blaze the Phoenix from Atlanta 1996 is still a mascot today. Very
So,
nice.
unfortunately,
Uh-oh.
Prior to the Tokyo Paralympics, Lizzie got redesigned. She was made sleeker with a more human body. It was supposed to be in the manga style to reflect, obviously, the Japanese hosts. And she had some new characteristics as well. She was funny, friendly, and very cheeky. She was described as a dedicated goal setter and in your face competitor. Her favorite food is bugs. Her favorite color is red. And her favorite para sport is wheelchair rugby. Can't argue with that. But the reason she likes the sport is because it's for true thrill seekers.
Oh, that is bad.
Yeah. But please don't look at the pictures of the redesigned Lizzie. You will be traumatized. She received a lot of criticism for being overly sexualized. It is creepy as heckity heck. Thankfully, they went back to the old design. Yeah, she's got these long, voluptuous legs and this sort of, yeah, frilled neck lizards should not be sexy when playing parasports. Frilled neck lizards should not ever be sexy. Let's just put it that way.
Is she playing wheelchair rugby?
You will see photos of her playing various
Okay.
parasports with her sexy legs and her sexy pout.
Okay, because I did find a wheelchair rugby one. The frill is much shorter, and there's
Yes.
way more body to her.
Yeah.
So she looks very human with a tail
Yeah.
and a thing around her neck. This is weird. Going out there.
So, as I said, thankfully for Paris, Lizzie was reverted to the gentler, cuddlier design.
Nice.
And you will still see her making appearances around Australia, including the Welcome Home celebration for the
Oh,
Paralympians this past September.
very nice.
So that's the story of our 3 mascots, 1 unofficial mascot, and Paralympic mascot.
Love it. Love it. Let's move over to sailing. It's a new millennium, so we have a new name for the sport. So goodbye yachting. Hello sailing. Organizers added more events to the program, bringing the total to 11, but today we're just going to talk about a couple of them. And we have a theme here. So, remember when we were talking about Seoul 1988 and we had that near death experience for the one
Yes.
sailor?
And
Okay,
then
so
one team had to basically
yes.
lose the race to save the other sailors.
Yes, yes. So death plays a part at Sydney 2000 as well, and some of the sailing, but we're talking about death hanging over one competition and also death threats. So we'll get to that, but let's talk first about the two-person keelboat open. For those of us who don't know the difference among boats, the keelboat is a star class that's no longer raced in the Olympics. It was in from LA 1932 through London 2012. According to AmericanSailing.com, this is the boat that you picture when you think about sailboats. So it's got a sail, and then it's got that fin-like thing on the bottom that provides ballast. So when the wind takes the sails and the boat keels over, the fin-like thing on the bottom of the boat produces ballast and counteracts the force of the wind because you can still capsize if the wind is really strong. So the race at Sydney was for both men and women. No women entered. Took place at Rushcutters Bay Marina, which is a little southeast of the Sydney Opera House, meaning you have this glorious opera house backdrop for the competition. This regatta consisted of 11 races, and a boat's placement in a race is how many points they earn for the race. And the cumulative lowest number of points wins. And if you got disqualified for a race for a penalty, you'd get the max number of points plus one for that race. So it'd be 17 points. Teams can throw out their two worst scores, except for if they got penalized, they would have to keep that bad score. So you could really fall down in the ratings. Big players in this race, we have hometown favorites Colin Bechel and David Giles. Colin's competing in his 5th Olympics, got a bronze in Atlanta, so we've got a hometown favorite that we can really hope for. His sister-in-law, Carrie Butler Bechel, was also competing in the windsurfing competition. So we got little family stuff going on too. We have the defending gold medalists from Brazil, Torben Grael and Marcelo Ferreira. Torben's competing in his 5th Olympics and his 3rd with Ferreira. From the USA, we have Mark Reynolds. He's 44. He's competing in his 4th and final games. He's been around in the sport a long time. He was supposed to go to 1980, got canceled because of the boycott. Next time he qualified was for Seoul 1988, won silver there. Barcelona, won gold. Atlanta got 8th. So he does not want to go out going in 8th. So he is a lot more intense and focused for Sydney. He's got a new partner too in 46-year-old Magnus Liljedahl. And going into Sydney, they are the current world champions. So these are the people to beat. And then we have Great Britain. Team is Ian Walker and Mark Covell. They have been racing together since 1999.
That seems a little recent.
Brought together by death. Walker and his teammate John Merricks had won silver in the two-person dinghy at Atlanta 1996. In 1997, they were at the European Championships in Italy. They were being driven to a celebration dinner with several other people. Driver lost control of the car and crashed. Walker survived. Merricks was killed instantly.
Oh, Lord.
Covell, Mark Covell, his original partner was Olympian Glenn Charles. Charles had competed at Atlanta 1996 with a different crew and placed 11th, but by 1998, these two were sailing together and looking to compete in Sydney. In December 1998, they were in the Sydney to Hobart race in the Tasman Sea. It started off sunny and there was a gale warning, but they still went. That developed into an east coast low with storm force winds, the equivalent of a Category 2 cyclone. During this storm, a wave crashed over their boat. It capsized. Charles drifted out of reach and he drowned. His body's never been recovered. This storm was incredible. According to the Australian Broadcasting Corp, during this race, 6 sailors died, 5 yachts sank, more than 60 yachts retired, and 55 participants were rescued by helicopter.
Wow.
A
Wow.
rabbit hole I did not go down was apparently this really changed how they did weather forecasting for the sport. So that is on my list. So this is a horrible tragedy. Walker calls Covell a month later and says, "Hey, I've been through this. I know what you're going through." And they become friends through their grief. And that led to them pairing up. And in a short time, they managed to make it to the games. But just ahead of the games, training wasn't going well. And they really felt a lot of pressure. So they just said, forget it. We're going to not worry. We're just going to have fun out there. And that mentality paid off in race 1, which they won. US was in 14th because they went right when the wind went left, and they dropped both of their whisker poles overboard and had to physically hold the jib as they crossed the finish line.
Let me just interrupt you for 1 second.
Mhm.
If Great Britain doesn't end up with a medal at the end of this, you and I are going to have a problem.
Well, keep listening. Regattas are long, though. You know, race 1 is race 1. We've got a lot of racing to do. Standings fluctuate as they usually do. And by the end of race 3, Great Britain was 6th overall. Australia's tied for 7th. USA was in 11th. And Brazil is topping the leaderboard, tied with Bermuda. I know.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it's Bermuda. It's an island. You would figure
Well,
if they're going to be good at any sport.
Well, not really. They have no, I mean, they've been sailing, but they don't have any kind of, at this point, Bermuda has won 1 medal in its Olympic career. We've got the Bermudan team of Peter Bromby and Lee White. They were becoming a factor in the race now. Bromby, who owned a trucking business, was competing in his 3rd Olympics and his 2nd with White. They had placed 13th in 1996. So would this year be the year they get on the podium? We don't know, but it's looking good. 10 countries are in the mix, though. 4th race, Australia won. They're starting to live up to their hope. They jump into the mix for the podium. Bermuda had a tougher race, dropped into 3rd. Brazil's on top. Great Britain is in 6th. USA tied for 10th. Race 6 was really windy, with winds blowing over 15 knots, and there was some rain going on as well. But it didn't matter for Bermuda. They had a great day. Won, and they are back in medal contention. We're still in Brazil atop, Australia in 2nd, Great Britain's moving up to 4th. Behind Bermuda, USA's moving up to 7th. It's still not looking good, though, because now we're running out of race time for US. They are taking a lot of risks, and they're being very aggressive in their racing, but all the choices they make keep backfiring on them. So their coach worked with both members of the team individually. He talked Reynolds into racing more conservatively because that's Reynolds' typical style. And then he got Magnus, who had been extremely regimented with his training to the point where he was not happy to see McDonald's at the village.
I don't know. Somehow, a man named Magnus I expect to just be an absolute beast when it comes to the training regimen.
Right. Well, he got him to relax and have a beer or two. And the next day they won and started moving up. They took a cue from having the Sydney Opera House in the background and said, it's not over until the fat lady sings. They
Or the
continued.
fat wombat.
They continued sailing well, and other teams started making mistakes. So in race 9, Bermuda had a breakdown that kept them from starting the race. Peter Bromby was able to get some redress for this, but according to ESPN, they still weren't in medal condition, or they weren't in medal contention by the end of the sailing day, because many days had multiple races. But by the last race, the podium was decided. It was going to be Brazil, USA, and Great Britain. But
Oh, thank goodness.
the order needed to be determined. At the start of the race, New Zealand starts early and pulls 6 boats with them. And if you start early, if you whip around and go back and restart, you're okay. If you just keep going, you're in trouble. Brazil didn't realize they started early. They kept going. They got an on-course side disqualification, which gave them the max number of points plus 1, so they got 17 points for the race. USA started early, but Reynolds realized it and got them turned around and restarted properly. They managed to get through the pack and finish the race ahead of Great Britain, not knowing that Brazil had been disqualified. So they don't know where they stand. Finally, the US finishes first. Fat Lady hasn't sung yet, though. There is a weight rule for the class, and they weighed sailors after the race. So their coach took his sweet time towing them to shore because he wanted them to sweat longer in their race gear. Because it was a hot day, he wanted them to sweat a little longer. However, that wasn't a worry. They ended up making weight. They were declared the victors, and they got their steps. They got their medals on the steps of the Sydney Opera House. Great Britain took silver. Brazil won the bronze. Bermuda finished 4th, which was Bermuda's highest sailing Olympic finish, and at the time, their second best Olympic finish ever. So then we move on to the one-person dinghy laser.
Wait, I'm exhausted just from that one race.
I know.
And there's so much more of sailing because there's so many categories, and
I
it's
know.
always wild.
I know. Well, this is another wild competition. Men's one-person dinghy laser class. This is a single-handed boat, so it's smaller. Everyone has to race with the same boat design. So this is one of those types of races. Now, rivalry is not a strong enough word to use when we talk about this class. We have to go back to Atlanta 1996 to fully appreciate the animosity between the Brit Ben Ainslie and the Brazilian Robert Scheidt. In Atlanta, the gold medal came down to the last race. Scheidt was he was ahead in the overall standings. He couldn't claim victory. And in that last race, officials raised the black flag after there had been 4 false starts. That meant any more false starts were going to be disqualified. So on the next start, Scheidt moved towards the line really quickly, and Ainslie followed so he wouldn't get left behind. They both jumped the line. They both were disqualified, which meant Scheidt was atop the leaderboard and Ainslie took second. Ainslie is angry about this. And this kicked off an amazing rivalry over the next quad. Titles go back and forth between the two. But Ainslie had Sydney in his sights and was ready for revenge.
Do we get another appearance of the black flag? Because that is a little sailing tidbit I have never heard before.
Well, we'll have to find out.
Oh.
Another possibility for a spoiler is Australian Michael Blackburn, who had gotten 4th in Atlanta. He's now at home. So is he going to spoil this rivalry here?
And his name is Blackburn.
Things started off grim for Ainslie. He finished 22nd in the first of the 11 races. Scheidt did much better. You could drop 2 low scores, but with so much racing left, you don't want to burn those freebies right away. However, things started going well for Ainslie. Race 3, he won. Scheidt took 22nd, so they kind of flip-flopped there. Meanwhile, Blackburn's still in the mix, and at times he is atop the leaderboard. But by race 8, everyone is on a roll. These 3 are consistently the overall top 3. And with 1 race to go, Blackburn's basically locked up the bronze, but gold and silver are still up for grabs. And Scheidt only needs to finish in the top 20 to repeat as gold medalist. That's when Ainslie dug in and he did what he could to exploit the rules. There was a lack of wind in the last race, so that got delayed. When it came back, Ainslie was ready. He sailed really close to Scheidt and forced him to the back of the pack. And then every place possible, Ainslie circled into a position that forced Scheidt to slow down. And at one point, Scheidt made a wrong turn and made contact with Ainslie's boat, which is a no-no. And then even though Scheidt manages to get around Ainslie, he's so far behind that he could only get 22nd place. Ainslie finishes 36th, but it was enough to win gold. Except it wasn't his yet because we had not one, but two rule infringement protests. Scheidt protested an incident at the start. He said Ainslie said he wasn't allowed sea room at this point in the race where Scheidt finally dropped Ainslie. And the discussions here went on for 2 hours. Scheidt's protest was dismissed. He was disqualified from the race based on video evidence. And Ainslie said, "What goes around comes around, and there's certainly a case of that today."
I wanna know at any point, did Ainslie just look at him and and shout, "Bullshite."
I'm sure there was some trash talking going on. Well, in Sao Paulo, fans were not pleased about this outcome. They burned Ainslie in effigy and sent well, we can't laugh about this. Sent death threats his way. So much so that the Australian police had to protect Ainslie during the games. Both of these men would go on to compete many more games, sometimes switching type of boat, so they weren't necessarily competing at each other, and they won many, many more medals between them, but this was, like, the best revenge for Sir Ben Ainslie.
Death threats are never funny, and we've talked about this in relation to Paris, like, let's take it down a notch,
Mhm.
but wow, that's like you said, a rivalry doesn't quite this was super personal.
Oh, it was, and Ainslie, I believe, was still 19 in Atlanta, and he was just this up and coming star, and there are elements in the research where he's kinda like, "I don't know what would have happened if I had actually won Atlanta. Would he have been as driven? Would there have been a different kind of pressure?" But this really made him focus, and he's like, "I just wanna be the best, and I wanna beat this guy, and I'm gonna do it." And it was totally legit what he did, and I've got a little video clip that shows him just Scheidt tries to go, and Ainslie just cuts in front of him and cuts him off, basically. And it's incredible, the gamesmanship. And I don't know if they've changed the rules since then, but it really made for an interesting race. And, we never pay a lot of attention to sailing because it's always well, for Paris, it was just we couldn't get there. And when it's not close, it's harder to pay attention to. I think the sports that aren't in the city really suffer for a lack of attention from at least, and maybe it's different when you're watching at home on the couch and you can choose whatever, but and sailing's always been tough to watch on TV.
Right, because it's not simple to understand. There are so many rules. It's hard to film for television because watching it from a drone is the best angle, but doesn't make for great TV. Though this sounds like this made for some really great TV.
Man, and you're right in the city. The athletes get to stay in the actual village. I think they really appreciated that, and you get the crowds coming in, and it lends for a different atmosphere. So I'm really curious how LA is gonna do it because they're gonna be close to everything again, and it would be interesting to go and try to watch a race in person and just see what can you tell from watching on shore.
Maybe we'll
But
get one of those little view boats. Oh, let's try and get a view boat.
okay, I'm down.
I can swim-ish. No, actually, I'm a good swimmer, and I know when to put a life jacket on.
So we say I still have to poke around the other sailing races to see if there's anything else because I just was like the first two I looked at were these amazing stories, and who knows what else is going on in the Sydney 2000 sailing competition. Oh, sources.
So sources for me were Olympics.com, The Olympic Design, NBC, Sydney Morning Herald, The Senior, Channel 7 in Australia, News, Paralympics website, Paralympics Australia, Nightline, also Australian TV, via their Facebook site, and Slate Magazine.
All right. And I used Australian Broadcasting Company, American Sailing, the BBC, ESPN, The Guardian, ILCA Sailing, The Independent, Olympedia, Olympics.com, Royal Gazette, Sail World, Sail GP, Sailing World, SailWorldCruising.com, Team GP, and The Telegraph. Oh, man. It is fun going back to Sydney.
So, things we need to know for Brisbane. Don't be afraid of a kangaroo mascot. Don't make mascots sexy. And possibly Fatso. Oh, I think that's what a Terry Tutberitsa was thinking when she saw me with that cookie. So maybe, Brisbane, I can be your Fatso mascot.
All right. Well, while we picture that, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Let us know what you remember from Sydney 2000 or what you would like Fatso's Wombat mascots to do.
And we do love hearing from you. You can chat with us and other listeners on our Facebook group, Keep the Flame Alive Podcast. Email us at flamealivepod@gmail.com. The voicemail and text line is always open at 208-352-6348. That's 208-FLAME-IT. And if you need more Olympics and Paralympics and possibly more sailing stories in your life, you can get our newsletter. It's on Substack, and you can sign up for that at flamealivepod.com. We'll have a link to that in the show notes.
Next week, we are talking with Paralympic gold medal swimmer, Sergeant First Class Ellie Marks. Ellie talks with us about Paris, how she adapts for training, because she's got some amazing stories about, and also how she helps other swimmers improve and get better. So join us for that conversation. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, keep the flame alive.